again. But whatever, it's better.
It's not as noticeable if it is.
No, and the
There's
CPU's
a bit
way
of-
down, so it's good now. But I'll have to come back to that.
That's because I stopped hacking you. I'm Elite Hacksaw.
All right, I think it should be okay.
Elite Hacksaw.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. Okay, should be live now. I don't got the solo shots today, but I shall revisit that later. Clearly, I have hit the limit of something. Am I running this?
You should have just got a Mac.
I'm just wondering if
I'm just kidding.
Did I change this? No, I didn't change this. Okay. Yeah, should have. Okay, we should be live, and GonnaGeek.com/live should be with the right information now. So 17 minutes in, we got to remember that that's when we started.
17
actually, it's just saving
minutes.
still.
We? I think that's a you problem.
Link has been
snizzap.
updated.
Snippity snappity. Snip snap. Ba, 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 ba.
All right, we're good, I think. I shall revisit that later, figure out what happened there, because it worked fine last week. So
I blame me. I did something.
it could be a number of things, but that is a problem for me to figure out in the future.
That's a problem for future Steven. Sucks to
Alright.
be him.
Okay, I think I'm good. Are we good? Let's see,
See.
did people find the new link?
I almost misspelled link. Oops.
There we go.
Bum, ba-dum, bum, bum.
Do you
What's
see
that,
what you think they're
Damien?
seeing?
Yeah, I don't understand what he's asking.
Ruh-roh. Better go my solo shot, see what I'm missing. What do I... I don't know. I'm not sure.
Three old dudes with beards. I mean,
It's the beard cast.
I'm a little
Better
worried
bearding.
that I've exposed myself. Have I exposed myself?
if you did, I wouldn't know. I'm never looking at you.
Did
I mean-
SP win me over? No.
Your camera stops at like this level, so how would we know?
Oh, are we talking about the Rode? Are we talking about the Rode? Because I'm still on the Rodecaster Pro 1. I went back to that. I'll talk about that in the show. Is that what we're going on about?
I don't.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah,
I don't know.
whatever.
Hi.
Let's
Hi.
finally get
Let's
going
go.
here.
Let's go. Okay. Here we go.
I'm Chris Farrell from the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, a wacky weekend morning show, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out right now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to episode 288 of Better Podcasting. On this show, we continue our podcast media host discussion, talking to Chris Farrell about his experiences with Podbean and Spotify for podcasters.
But first, in this week's Better Podnerings, topics include even yet more Rodecaster Pro 2 problems. We also say farewell to Bob Heil. There's now iOS 17.4 transcripts and maybe a little OBS talk.
And finally, in this week's Better Pod Back, we round up some Discord feedback, including one listener who is in Spotify disbelief, and an update on our Road Target Challenge.
Lauren?
Start the show now!
This is Better Podcasting. We are hobby podcasters through and through, just like you. That's
Why is
we
the
are
intro
different.
video messed up?
We minimize
Oh,
the
there we
money
go.
talk so that you can focus on building a better podcast.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Better Podcasting. I am Steven, and I am pleased to say SP is here, but wait for the comma after that.
I am so glad to finally be on a podcast about podcasting with another podcaster that has 500 episodes under his belt. And Steven, you ain't it.
And the comma is because Chris Farrell is here as well. Hey, Chris.
Are we trying to imply that quantity trumps quality? Because that would be the only way I would be on that echelon.
I'm just saying, you have a show with over 500 episodes, right?
553 now, I think.
Yeah, I have a show that's had over 500 episodes. That's just the two of us. Steven, no.
No, not at all. I am not in the 500s club, and I'm okay with that because that means that I am boring. That's what that means. I'm boring.
That's most Canadians.
Well, what show of yours is closest to 500 there, Steven? Do we need to bring back the Fanboy Buzz just to hit 500?
We don't talk about that. No, the Gonna Geek show, I think, is the closest. And
at one episode a month, it will reach 500 episodes in the year 2043.
If you are feeling completely lost right now, Chris Farrell is our co-host over on the official Gonna Geek show. This is the Chris we always talk about for the Gonna Geek show. So Chris Farrell is our co-host over there, and today he's joining us because we're going to continue on our discussion about media hosting, and he recently switched media host, but we'll get to that a little bit later. And before we end up getting over to that discussion, let's remind you, we have our How I Saved My Podcast story. So if something's gone wrong and you fixed your podcast, please let us know how did that happen so we can bring back that segment. As well, the hobby podcaster profile should be making a return soon. There is a submission that is pending, and we'll have to bring that back in one of the future episodes here. So is that not exciting or what?
Totally exciting. I can't wait because you haven't told me who or whom you are waiting on, or you have, or whatever. I mean, I'm excited. So if anybody else wants to submit for the profile, get a hold of Steven and myself, and we'll let you know what to do.
Let's get into the better. No. Now, before we get into the better podnerings, Chris Farrell, I know it was a long time ago that you were on this show, but let's let you introduce yourself a little bit to the better podcasting audience. What's your history with podcasting?
Boy, it has been a while, hasn't it? But my history with podcasting is listen to podcasts for a long time. Then way back in April 2012, some friends and I started a little podcast called the All Things Good and Nerdy Podcast. That was effectively then modeled after shows like Twit and things like that. There was a roundtable discussion of geeky things, and we've been doing that show ever since. And strangely enough, I'm the last of the original hosts of the All Things Good and Nerdy Podcast, as two of our original hosts have since migrated out. And through doing that show, ended up meeting the guys you know here, Steven and SP. Put together the Gonna Geek Network with these guys. We were a team. Been doing the Gonna Geek show. I've been podcasting for ages, just on the hobby level, of course. None of my stuff is monetized. I've always kind of joked and be like, man, if I could find a way to monetize it just enough to pay all the bills, that's the dream. Because then it's still fun.
Well, being a hobby podcaster is definitely being a legitimate podcaster, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise, Chris.
If they want to tell me otherwise, I encourage them to tweet it at me, and I will have strong words for them in return.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and if you are a fellow hobby podcaster like Chris Farrell, well, you should definitely check out the Gonna Geek Network, because we have a bunch of awesome Gonna Geek Network members that are mostly all hobby podcasters, so please check that out there. All right, we're going to kick the better podnerings off with what we had teased last week. And I'm a little lost here because this is an iOS related thing. And usually I would throw this over to SP, which is the resident Apple user on this show. However, I do feel like Chris might trump you a little bit because now he's running a M2 Mac Mini over on his main machine
M1.
as well. So
M1.
maybe he
I'm
has
not
one
that
more
rich.
device now. You have an M2 Mac Mini though, right? Or M1?
No, it's an M1.
Oh, M1. Okay,
M1.
sorry. Well,
I cheaped out.
Fair enough. However, you do have a desktop Mac, so let's still turn it over to SP to tell us about this.
Okay, good. So iOS 17.4 came out of beta and it hit the waves a couple of days ago, and that is right around the 4th of March 2024. Yesterday, I upgraded my phone to iOS 14 or 17.4, and the reason was to get my phone to the point where I could get the new Apple Podcast app, which now has transcripts. I was really curious about how it was going to work, what it was going to look like, and that sort of stuff. Basically, when you go into an episode in Apple Podcasts on iOS 17.4, it's another screen in the episode view. And you can get to it by, the three dots, the menu dot, and it'll bring up transcript view. So you go into transcript. This is this long text thing that you can scroll through. It doesn't play with your episode. It doesn't play along like the words. It doesn't read along as it's going along, but it is a long text thing. Now, websites that you say are hyperlinked. Like right now, if I say betterpodcasting.com, it will be hyperlinked in the Apple Podcast transcript, and you can click it and you can go to that website. But if it's not a typical domain like a .net, .org, .gov, .com, it's not going to work. Last episode with Better Podcasting 287, we had a little segment like this on live.space. And we said live.space many times. And it actually put live.space in there. But it was not hyperlinked. So if it's not a normal domain name, it's not like it was one of the new custom ones, it's not going to have it in there. And Space has been around for a while, so I'm kind of surprised it's not linked, but it's Apple. There is no speaker identification in the transcript. It's just one long, big transcript. And overall, it looks good for free. It's not too many errors as long as the speakers are intelligible and they're talking about normal words. Like last episode, we talked about a slang term for the store Target, the Target stores, and I called it Target because I grew up next to the first Target. We always called it Target back then, and I continue to call it Target now. Well, it actually put in the transcript Charge. Like charge is what it did. I'm like, oh, okay. So it doesn't know Target. And I don't know if they're searchable, if the transcripts themselves are searchable, or if they're there for discovery or anything. I literally think they're in there to stave off a lawsuit, an accessibility lawsuit. I think that's what Apple put them in there for. But now the transcripts are there. You can actually, as a podcaster, I didn't do this, but you can go in and you can download it, and then you can upload, you can correct it, and you can upload a corrected version. So if I wanted to put in Target for that one word, I could download it and then upload the corrected version. So that's available there. But just if you are out there podcasting and you just didn't know how to get into any of the smart transcript operations, you didn't want to pay for it or anything, they're free. And this is it. Just doesn't have speaker identification included.
I'm really glad that this is happening because I do think even with those issues, this is huge. I think this is a big change for accessibility, like you said. And even if it's mostly for in-app for now, I know you mentioned the other way, but I think that this is a big hole that has now been closed because we never had transcripts for ours unless it was something automated. There have been automated live captions for a long time on some things like on the Android side of things, but in Apple Podcasts is massive. So this is great. And I'm glad to hear that it mostly worked except for your charge. So let's make sure we use lots of slang going forward. Chris, did you have a chance to try this yet on your iPad?
So I don't use the Apple Podcasts app on my iPad because I found it underwhelming many years ago, and I've been using Pocket Casts because it works cross-platform between iOS, Android, and PC and things like that. While SP was describing what all was going on, though, I did pull up the App Store because, like Stephen mentioned, I'm on an M1 Mac Mini for my podcasting machine, which can run Apple iPad OS and iOS apps. The Podcasts app, I couldn't find in the App Store as anything I could download on my Mac Mini. So I don't know how Apple envisions the right way for desktop users or laptop users to consume podcasts when the podcast app I couldn't find in the App Store. So maybe, oh, that's because I have it installed already, evidently. I looked in the wrong place.
It's like, I know it's in there, dude.
Yeah, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I can't find it in the App Store because, yeah, I just pulled up the app tray and hey, there's the Apple Podcast app. So, no, I haven't played with it because I didn't think I had it until literally just now. I'm a podcasting authority, everyone.
It's okay. We know you still have your Apple desktop training wheels on. We'll let it go.
Well, to be fair, like I said, it's not an app I use because I've been using Pocket Cast for years at this point.
Fair enough.
I do have a caveat that I want to throw in there for hobby podcasters. If you've been trying to talk about something anonymously on a podcast, this is another tidbit that might help give you away. Like if somebody's searching, I mentioned I didn't know if it was searchable or discoverable or whatever, but if there is a way for people to go in or corporations to go in and search all of Apple Podcasts for mentions about their company, or maybe they have your voice on file eventually, and then they match it up with, this doesn't exist yet, but if they match it up with your voice print in podcasting or whatever, then they're going to find out who you are and what you said about the company. So just saying, the transcripts are a step in that direction for people to identify you if you want to remain anonymous. Now, the other aspect of this is monetization, where if you're advertising and an advertiser looks at your show, reads a couple of transcripts or throws it through AI and says, oh no, I don't approve of what they say or whatever, then you're just not going to get the ad deal. We don't talk about monetization here on this show. So I'm going to focus on the anonymousness of transcripts and how they could help give you away. And just throwing it out there. I don't podcast anonymously anymore. And I don't think you really can in this day and age, but if you think you can, this is just another step in the direction of, oh no, you can't.
All right, well, we'll move on to some sad news, and this is about legendary Bob Heil.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of posts on this. Bob Heil, of course, ran the Heil sound company, who's big in the ham radio aspect and wanted to bring that radio FM sound to ham radio. So he actually created a bunch of gear and a bunch of microphones that were made to bring in that, the boom FM sound in. And along the way of when podcasting started, there were some podcasters that started to use one of his microphones, which was the Heil PR40. And I believe it was Leo Laporte that really made it big in podcasting space. But there was a few years there, maybe even as much as 10 years that went by where you weren't an established podcaster unless you were, a professional podcaster or whatever, unless you were using a Heil PR40. And we had a chance to cross paths here and there on chats and on live streams and stuff like that. And, he just passed away this past week. So a lot of people owe a lot of their audio experience to Bob, and he had a lot of passion for rock and roll and audio and ham radio and broadcasting. So he will be missed, but he has left his imprint on the industries, and I will say that with an S on the end, industries, by his work over the years. So like I said, he will be missed. He was a character. If you ever actually go over to YouTube, because I know you can look up old streams of his, he is a character on any of the streams, always joking, always high energy, always just on. So yeah, I'll miss seeing Bob around.
I am not using my Heil PL2T. However, it is sitting right over here for emergency use should I need it. And I would like to just give credit where credit is due. When I was looking for a scissor arm many years ago, I tried the Rode PSA-1, ran into a couple of issues in a row with squeakiness, and the Heil PL2T was there to save me after I gave up on that one. And I should have chosen this one to begin with. But I was cheap, and at the time, the import fees were a little more expensive.
I am using my Heil PL2T, and I'm also using the 12-inch riser that came with it. And I forgot about that. I don't know why I forgot about it. I use it every day, every time I podcast. I've got the Heil boom arm on it.
All right, I just got a quick update for the OBS fans. For those of you who didn't know this, I am a person that likes to do video. That's why we have a video show. It's definitely not to see my ugly mug, definitely not that. However, I, for some reason, do video. And the way that I currently stream video is by using OBS to compile all the videos together and also, you know, capture audio at the same time, because you kind of got to do that if you're streaming out. And I decided this week I was going to experiment with the multi-track audio function of the OBS features. This is something that years ago I think I talked with Chris about a little bit, and I just never got around to. However, I decided I was going to give this a shot. And what this is doing is basically recording multiple different audio tracks within the video file that I'm recording. Now, here's the thing. This is not a new thing by any stretch of the imagination. It's been around for a long time. And also back when I was using XSplit, I had dabbled a little bit with that. But I decided I was going to give this a try so that I had a backup recording of myself. Because right now I am using a Rodecaster Pro original. And yes, that's my main audio recording. But if something goes wrong with that recording, I don't have a clean backup track. Yes, I could get the one from the video that is mixed in with SP week to week on this show. Or he could send me my version, but that would be mixed in with the audio music we play live, the bumpers, the intros, and all that. So this here will allow me to isolate myself on an individual track, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out. And I'm doing that using the ASIO drivers to grab just the channel that my microphone is connected into and feed it into a direct channel in OBS. And then I am pulling the participants in through Video Ninja, that's the streaming service we use to connect, and putting them on their own tracks. And then, like with my microphone, I'm using the ASIO driver to pull in the music track from the Rodecaster individually. And so in theory, at the end, I will have a multi-track video with all of those individual components so that if something goes wrong, I can go back to that. We'll see what problems creep up, but it is something that I thought I would start experimenting with as just a way to have an extra backup of my audio. And if you want to get more into the weeds, because there's some ways that I had to do that to combine it with the stream, come to our Discord at betterpodcasting.com/Discord, because, yeah, I'd love to talk more with anybody interested in that. But this takes me perfectly, because I just explained a little bit about how I capture my device. I wanted to ask our guest, Chris Farrell, about his audio setup, because I know recently you decided you were going to consolidate. You were going to pop out the mixer, get rid of it, make some changes, and I thought some of our audience might want to hear about your new setup, because it is a device that we've actually touched on, I think, on the Better Podcasting live chat a long time ago when somebody brought it up. So share what you've done to pare down your setup.
Sure. So I had 4 and 8 channel mixer on my desk for many years, and when I upgraded my podcasting rig, said, okay, maybe it's time to get rid of some of the gear on here that I'm not using. And my setup had evolved so that I really wasn't using a soundboard that much anymore and need to do multi-channel stuff. So I started looking around during one of the early Prime Day sales at, what's some alternatives? And I found on sale at the time, I don't remember what the sale price was. I could probably go look it up. I got the Vocaster 2, and I replaced pretty much everything I had on my desk with the Vocaster 2 that just plugs into the back of my Mac Mini that it's stored right next to. And everything's been pretty easy from that point forward. And I'm able to multi-channel record off the Vocaster 2, not in the same level that Steven is. My guests on the podcast are mixed into their own channel, and I have my own channel, so I don't get an individual channel for each set of guests. But I use that kind of as my primary backup for things. But for ATGN, we record all of that on StreamYard. So honestly, I rely 99% of the time on StreamYard because it'll record each individual track for me in its own channels that I can then download and mix together as I need to. And I have local recordings I pull off on my Vocaster just as backups in case something goes wrong. And I think I've had to use the backup once because I ended the stream slightly earlier than I expected to. So that was the best way to go and pull that audio that I was missing that wasn't recorded by StreamYard. But I got to admit, guys, I'm a little lazy here and rely on StreamYard pretty heavily to handle all of my recording and just have a couple backups.
Chris, when you say that you are recording off your Vocaster, it doesn't have a recording capability, does it?
No, it doesn't. So I should clarify. I'm taking the channels off the Vocaster and plugging that into Audacity or not Reaper, Hindenburg. Sorry, because they have a bunch of FAQs on their site of how to set things up with Hindenburg. So I played around with that a little bit because I bought many years ago when they were doing one of their sales for like 99 cents to buy the full license for regular Hindenburg. I bought that and I hadn't played with it much. So I've played with that a little bit to do that recording locally. I will have to admit though that I default to Audacity most of the time when I'm doing audio editing, but my workflow's kind of changed. Little spoiler alert coming up because of my podcasting provider I've shifted to. So I've started primarily focusing on the video side of the things and then getting the audio out of that.
And then also, Chris, you mentioned that you use the multi-track. Do you use the actual multi-track or did you just use the single stereo track that comes out of StreamYard?
So for StreamYard, I take the individual video feeds or the audio feeds if I'm doing audio that it records, and then I mix them together in my God, I'm having a brain fart here in Audacity. Sorry, brain fart moment here. I've been playing around a little bit with some other video editors because it'll output the video files that can just be easily imported, but I haven't shifted to doing that predominantly. So since I am a slacker and still learning things, most of my video editing is done in iMovie. Which is not the most powerful tool, but gets the job done as I'm learning to use other video editing tools.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with our audience because I know that there's a balance that people have to strike between setup, what they want to achieve, physical space and all that. And when I heard you were making the change before, I was jealous of your newfound desk space.
It is quite a bit of desk space. And honestly, I took an old laptop stand I had and I put the Mac Mini in the legs of the laptop stand. And on top of the laptop stand is where the Vocaster sits. So they're literally stacked on top of each other without, actually touching each other so that it saves a lot more space. Because I originally was like, well, I can just set the Vocaster on the Mac Mini. I was like, I don't know if I want to set something directly on the PC that's sitting there just because I'm paranoid. So it's suspended on a laptop stand above it. It works fairly well.
Sorry, I didn't scroll. Now let's get to the part of the show where we're going to have to start creating a segment, I think, at this point, which is Rodecaster Pro 2 issues.
So I bought the Rodecaster Pro 2. I purchased it in May of 2022. So it's not even been 2 years yet. About last year, this time I had to RMA it because of the sound pad issues where they would play or not play or continue to play over and over again or whatever. And it was a known issue that Rode claimed was because of some faulty part that made it into the initial production run. And so I sent mine in, and as a show of good faith, they sent me one out as mine was shipping in. So I actually think I did have both of them in the studio here for like a day, but I shipped it out in a show of good faith. It was not going to work for me anyway. So I shipped it out, and I've been dealing with this. I think we determined at the time, if you go back to the episode that we did at the time, we determined that this was a refurbished unit. And the question was, is it going to hold up? And the answer is no, it is not going to hold up. You have to fast forward to March 2024. We are 22 months into me having the purchase. Not even really, because that would be at the end of the month. So 21 and a half months in. And while it is working and recording right now, it will be leaving the studio tomorrow because it has limited functionality. During Better Podcasting last week in episode 287, this was off camera and before we started, I was trying to transfer a file to the sound pads, and Steven could back me up on this. I was saying, oh, just wait. And I was trying to do something, and I was like, oh, this is not good. I think that is one of the things that I said. And then eventually I'm like, oh, let's just go. Let's do it. And I just left it alone. After we finished recording, I tried to load a sound into a sound pad, and it didn't work. I tried to reset. It didn't work. I tried to reset through the central and it didn't work. The file was not going on there. I tried multiple files. I tried multiple sound pads. So I contacted Rode support that night. So 1 week ago today, 7 days ago today, I contacted Rode support and it took them a day or two to get back to me. I think it was Friday by the time they actually got back to me the first time. And then it was this, we're going to wait a working day to respond to you each time. Ugh. It's been a little slow and frustrating that way. But I was instructed to perform a reset, which I did again, just in case they changed something. I made sure that my Rode Central software, which is the software on the computer, was updated. I made sure that the firmware was updated, and there was no update on either. I was current on both. And I did a reset on the machine. I tried to import the show and do the transfer to the pad. It didn't work. I tried just doing the same thing and creating a new show. It didn't work. Then I tried to accomplish the same reset using the software on Rode Central. And you can do it both ways, by the way. So then I tried to import the show and then use the Rode Central to transfer the sound pad over. It didn't work. What it would do is it would say, in every case, it would say that the file was transferred. It would change the color of the pad. But every time I tried to play it, it didn't play. So it didn't work. I tried multiple pads, multiple files, multiple times. So finally, after taking a video and giving it to Rode, was told yesterday to provide the information for an RMA. An hour before, just less than an hour before we were scheduled to record tonight, they got back to me with the RMA information. I have to pay for shipping. I am going to send it back because it's not working. And they said, we'll take a look at it. And depending on what it is, we will either repair it or we will send you a replacement. I think what's going to happen is the same thing. They're going to send me a refurbished unit. So let's go over some of the other issues that I've been having with this, because I know there's been a lot of reviews on the Rodecaster Pro 2, and there has been a lot of people that have had good things happen, but I just want to describe what's happening here. So there's a record of the not so good things that are going on.
I was just going to say, I would love it if you would recap how you are currently on your second Rodecaster Pro 2 already, which was already a refurb, a short amount of time after you originally bought it, like, you know, within a month sort of period. I would love it if you would recap that history.
Did they make you pay shipping on that one too?
If I remember correctly, I think so, but I don't remember 100%. I was trying to find that information and I didn't see any like UPS shipping receipts or, you know, the label, the shipping label.
If I remember correctly, didn't they advance you it?
They advanced me it, but then I had to ship it back.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So I don't have 2 units in the house here. I just have the 1 unit. So the power button, I've heard some people have issues with the power button. I'm having almost an impossible time either turning it on or turning it off, which leads me to want to just leave it turned on. But then I'm worried about power spikes. So I have to turn it on and off. And it's just very, very frustrating. Like really crank down on the button. I don't remember the first one being this bad. Really crank down on the button and then waiting 4 seconds, count to 4, and then releasing the button and maybe it'll work, right? So the power button is hit or miss. When something could be going wrong with the hardware, or I don't think it's the software because I've updated or reset the firmware several times. It froze the last time that I tried to save the show settings. Like I imported the show, that worked fine, but then I tried to save it to a SD card or a new SD card, and it was just freezing every single time, and it was cutting out the USB to the computer. And then occasionally it has been freezing about 2 or 3 minutes into recording. I just chalked that up to, the gremlins or whatever. But now with everything else going on, I'm just going to throw that on the table that I have witnessed it freezing 2 or 3 minutes into a recording. Fortunately, it hasn't been active in or podcast recording. It's been before. So I've been able to reset it and get it going again. Literally take the power cord out, put the power cord back in, reboot it, and then restart the recording. And it was fine after that every single time, but it's been happening. So next week, since I don't have another Rodecaster Pro 1, I don't have a DLZ Creator XS, I don't have a Zoom P8, I don't have a Mixcast 4, the Tascam Mixcast 4. All I've got is this sucker back here, the Zoom P4. So next week when we record, I'm just guessing because of shipping time, and then they're going to have time to look. Probably about a month, I'm thinking, that I'm going to be without this thing, and I'll have to be podcasting through that Zoom P4. So a little bit frustrating. I do have a backup. I'm not going to be, well, we'll go over it next week when I'm on it, but Rodecaster Pro 2 troubles persist.
Before we end the Better Podnerings, I just want to double tap something about that. This is 2 times you've had issues. And I want to say, I have enough gear that I am going to actively try to sell to fund a new mixer. And I cannot bring myself to want to buy the Rodecaster Pro 2 or the Rodecaster Duo just because of your issues. I'm making that clear right now. This is me not being a customer because of that. I just don't want to get into that situation, and I'm just going to keep putting up with the Rodecaster Pro 1 problems until something else is on the market, or there's a new generation, or they've gone fully stable, because I was really thinking about it. Like, it seemed like things had evened out for you and everything, so maybe I could, sell it, but I've made the decision that I'm not going to. I just can't bring myself to do that and risk that. So there you go. Let's say that right now. This is at least one customer that is not going to be a customer.
I honestly didn't want to tell you because I figured if it was an easy fix that it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But when it started turning into more of a week-long saga, and then now it's going to be at least a month, if I'm guessing correctly, then yeah, I needed to tell you, and I needed to tell everybody else. I need to be honest about what's going on with this thing. I know there's been some reviews, some like almost 2-year reviews out there on YouTube. Yeah. And I'm glad it's been working for you. I really am. I love it when it's working, but when it's not working, it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating because it's a singular piece of gear that I can't just swap part of it out. I have to buy the whole thing or replace the whole thing. It's $699. And as a podcaster, if you're planning on an RMA, like I said, this has to ship to California. It's got to get into their queue and then ship back. So I'm thinking it might be excessive, but a week for shipping on both ends, because I'm not paying for the good shipping, and I don't think they're paying for the good shipping. And then it's going to be in their queue. I don't know how big their queue is, so I'm just guessing that's another week. So it's at least 3 weeks. So yeah, if you're a podcaster and you're depending on this, like fortunately I have a backup. It's not as good, but I've got a backup. If you're depending on this to do your show, yeah, it's a lot of money to pay for something that might break.
So at this point, would you say you have buyer's remorse then after having now your second issue, or is it more of, I just drew the bad luck?
That is a great question because like I said, when it works, it works. I don't have to worry about Polywave. I don't
don't put that salt in my wound, SP.
I will, because that is one of the reasons that I got this, is that I didn't want to deal with Polywave. And when I heard that this wasn't Polywave, I'm like, oh, I'm home sort of thing. And it's got a format, a fit form that fits on my desk. I can look over and easily see. The screen's not as big as a Mackie DLZ Creator, but it's big enough. It's push button, and it's very versatile in what you want to do, a mix minus, tons of ways to record, tons of ways to mix minus, tons of ways to choose out. You can select different outs through each of the 4 headphones. It's a very, very versatile machine for a streamer and a podcaster. And I like it, but I hate it because of the trouble. It should not do. I should get, in my opinion, if I don't hit it with lightning or anything, I should probably get 5 to 7 years out of this thing. And I haven't had 1 year with either of the ones that I've had.
Well, if you've had any issues with anything like this, we'd love to hear from you. Come to our Discord at betterpodcasting.com/Discord and let us know. We always like to report that to the audience so that people can make an informed decision. Let's get into our media host segment where we're going to talk about Chris's experience. All right. We mentioned this. Chris Farrell, he recently changed media hosts, and this seemed like a good opportunity for him to talk about it. And wouldn't you know, the one that he changed from was one we reviewed a couple weeks ago, and the one he changed to is the one we reviewed last week. So Chris Farrell is the ideal podcaster. There is no other podcaster on this planet to be better positioned than to come on this show right now.
No pressure, no pressure.
All right. So, Chris, let's start off here by having you talk a little bit about your experience moving over. Like, what prompted you to make your move? Actually, so where did you switch from and where did you switch to? Tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, so some background here is when All Things Good and Nerdy podcast started back in 2012. It was a very different world when it came to podcast hosts out there, and prices were a bit different than what we've seen compared to in today's world. So at that point in time, I remember when I did the initial research, most sites were either, to get the cheaper plans, were limiting you to X amount of hours per week or X amount of download bandwidth being used, things like that. So back in 2012, April 2012, we had picked Podbean to go with because at the time they were one of the cheapest unlimited hosting providers for audio. So the concept there was we could upload as much as we wanted, and didn't matter how many downloads we got or how many episodes we uploaded in a given month, we were good to go. And in an effort to save money, I had used my PayPal account and just set up a recurring yearly subscription with Podbean. So I think at that point in time, it was like $99 a year for unlimited hosting via Podbean, which when I did all my pricing a decade plus ago, that was a pretty decent deal. Now that shifted a bit. We're now 12 plus years later from when that was. And things kind of changed a bit. We had some different considerations, and I started looking at some of our costs we had for the podcast. And it's a hobby podcast. It's not free to do, but it's relatively cheap. And the biggest cost for me at that point in time was hosting on Podbean. And I enjoyed the Podbean service. I never had any issues with it, but I went, I haven't really shopped around and looked at things. And I kind of made a realization that, well, if I move it to, I was thinking in my head Anchor, because I remembered Anchor, and then went, oh wait, Spotify bought Anchor, and then followed that thread to do a little research on Spotify for podcasts in addition to some other providers that were out there. And honestly, I did some math in my head and went, well, if we migrate into our hosting at Spotify for podcasts, that doesn't cost me money. I can take that money we were paying for our subscription there, and I can apply it to another service that we wanted to use for streaming, because we've been playing around with the free version of StreamYard. And I said, well, if we do the paid version, that opens up some capabilities for us that I think might be helpful. And I said, shifting to the free hosting provider gives me that $100+ a year I was spending on that to then almost pay for a year's worth of StreamYard, pay a little bit extra for it to get the full year subscription. And I said, this is why I want to make that move. Not because I'm unhappy with Podbean and the service I had there. Guys, there's no dirt to be gotten out of here where Chris is going to come in and trash Podbean as the former provider. I only really had one major quibble with them as we were going through this process, which we'll talk about as we get into this topic more. It was just, I could cut cost and shift that money to something else that helped my podcast.
Given the fact that Spotify has made some pretty radical changes over the past 3 months, they've gotten rid of their Spotify exclusive podcasts. They have gotten rid of their creator tools and transitioned most people, try to offboard them to Riverside, and their earnings aren't all that great. Are you, since now you're on Spotify, concerned about possibly the longevity of the service?
So the first 2 points I didn't really care about, to be honest, because I'd never really listened to the first stuff you were talking about that was on Spotify. And the second point, all the tools they had and things that were baked in, I never cared because we were doing a video show outside of things. And I just need to be able to take my either video or audio file and upload it and have it go out via RSS feed for subscribers. So I didn't care so much about that. Now, I'd be lying if I didn't say I had some concerns in regards to the longevity of the Spotify for Podcasters platform just because of the budget issues they've been having. That being said, it wasn't painful to transition to Spotify for podcasts. If I have to transition out to something else because they end of life it, it's going to be a pain in the butt, but I'll at least have those cash savings for the time that I was here, and I can transfer that out to somewhere else and figure out how best to maximize my dollars. So I guess my big takeaway would be, at least for me, it was when I first started looking into transitioning providers, I was a bit daunted by the process, being like, oh, I don't want to screw this up and have everything go wrong. The fact that it was relatively smooth transitioning from Podbean to Spotify, I'm not exactly concerned if I have to do it again in the future.
So you said you found it daunting. I just can't believe that. It's not like there's a hobby podcast out there that's dedicating an entire season to reviewing a bunch of different services because they found the whole process daunting.
So, I mean, and that's fair. And I will have to give credit to both Spotify for Podcasters and Podbean, as they both had fairly detailed help and FAQ pages on the transitioning out and in process to help with that. And Spotify for Podcasts did pretty much kind of handhold you through the process. When you say, I have a podcast I want to import, it takes you through a guide that each step of the way says, okay, we need this information from you. Okay, you're on Podbean. You need to go to your Podbean site and make these changes in your account. So it was relatively straightforward getting that figured out, but there's always that, oh crap factor of, am I going to screw something up and make it so that my entire feed gets screwed up in the transfer? I screw something up so my podcast subscribers can't get to me, something like that.
Once you transferred your RSS, how long did you keep your Podbean account going?
So I let the yearly subscription lapse, was what it was going to be. So that just ran out. Oh boy, I want to say it was like March 3rd is when the subscription ran out. So I'd gotten the emails from Podbean that was effectively, hey, we see you didn't pay. We're going to shut this down. Okay, you didn't pay after the week of grace period. Everything's been disabled, but if you start paying again, we'll resurrect things. Which brings me to the biggest difficulty I had with Podbean, which was, I mentioned early on, I had linked it to my PayPal account, just for simplicity's sake. So when you start trying to go and cancel your paid plan with Podbean, even their help documents say there's not a way in your My Account page or anything like that on Podbean to do it. They tell you to go to PayPal and to cancel your recurring payment there. That was kind of annoying because I was like, I don't know where the heck to do that. And the help documents they had there were for an earlier iteration before they had redesigned some of the stuff on PayPal's website. So it's not that I'm incompetent and can't figure it out, but it was, why don't you have a feature on your site that makes it real easy for me to say, okay, cancel, don't bill me again, shut down. But it was, if you've linked your PayPal account, which is the preferred method, you have to go via PayPal to cancel it, and which means then you get those emails from Podbean about, well, you haven't paid, you're naughty, here's what we're going to do to your account. And that was really the only step through this process that I found kind of annoying, is that there should be a real easy way on their site for me to be like, I'm transitioning out, or I want to shift to a different plan or to a free tier or something like that, where I can just cancel on the site itself.
I have some speculation about why that might be, since you're saying PayPal is.
So I do too.
Well, okay, I'll let you get to that one in a minute. But when we looked at Podbean, they actually no longer do offer PayPal to new accounts, as far as we could see. So I wonder if it's something in a legacy system or something, which is not an excuse. You should definitely be able to close it on the client side, but I wonder if it's related to that.
See, my conspiracy theory was less charitable, which was there's probably plenty of people that have since pod faded and kept their podcasts active. And if they have the recurring subscription on there, it just keeps going. And you don't have to worry about it then, because you have incoming cash coming in, whether there's new content being put up there or not. But I was also a bit annoyed at the process at that point in time when I made that thought in my head.
So going back to the question that I asked you, I don't know if you answered it before and I just missed it, but you quit your Podbean subscription on March 3rd, you said. When did you transfer over to Spotify?
So I transitioned over probably 7 weeks before it ran out, because I wanted to give myself some runway in case something went long in that transferring process. So I want to say that it was either late January or early February when we transitioned over to Spotify for Podcasters, because I knew that if something went wrong, I could effectively try and roll it back, and I still had Podbean for another 6-8 weeks at that point in time. And it took like a day or two basically for the redirect and stuff to take hold once I did everything I needed to on the Podbean side of things. And at that point in time, I didn't touch the Podbean site again once I had transitioned over to Spotify, other than to just log out one last time. And I think I changed the password to something and put it in my password manager.
Did you check all your feeds that you distribute to?
Yes, I did. And then I also, on the Spotify for Podcasters thing, there's a place where all those feeds are. And I had linked in there too. And those had all migrated successfully. Some were quicker than others. It was honestly Apple Podcasts was the slowest to pick up that the redirect was there from Podbean to Spotify. But it did, I want to say like 2 days after or so is when that happened. But I haven't noticed any places where the podcast feed is dead or it wasn't updating as it was supposed to.
So to be clear, you just did the change by putting in basically a 301 redirect from Podbean to Spotify. You did not go into podcastsconnect.com with Apple and change your RSS there.
Correct.
Okay.
In fact, it took me a while to remember what account I had used with Apple to put that podcast in there. And then I had weird hiccups of being able to try and log in. And by the time I logged in like a week later to check that, it was pointing at the right RSS feed for that podcast as near as I can remember. So perhaps when I made that change, I could have logged in and manually changed it in Podcast Connect, and I wouldn't have had to wait those 2 days it took for it to auto update itself and transition. I honestly just didn't think about it. And by the time I thought about it, it'd already been done automagically for me, for lack of a better term.
At the risk of having to yell at some kids to get off my lawn by asking this question, which will show my age, you've been around in podcasting for a while, on Podbean for a while. So I think your first experience with Podbean probably predates a lot of those automatic submission tools that existed in Media Host for destinations. Did you have anything automatically submitted where you went into Podbean and you said, add me to this directory?
So there were some things in Podbean that I believe I had come in later after the fact and made those connections there, but most of the stuff I had connected prior to those services being baked into Podbean. I want to say it was Amazon Music, actually. I think I did through their portal, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I honestly don't remember, and I guess I could log in and try and look, but I'm afraid I'll make my account active somehow again and start getting nagging emails.
So is there anything that you had to manually like account claim, like with Amazon, for example?
Yes, if I'm remembering correctly, I did have to go through there and have it linked to the email address that was quoted in the RSS feed, then go to that email address that's quoted in the RSS feed and do some confirmation stuff on there, even through their automated process. From what I recall, I did have to do that.
So going through the transition, do you have any recommendations for somebody that is transferring media host providers?
I mean, the biggest recommendation would be before you actually hit the button to do anything, read through the help information on your former host on transitioning out and the new host you're going to on the process for transitioning in so that you know what you're getting into. It's not overly complex, but if you click the wrong thing or you do something in the wrong place, you don't want to put yourself in a bad state. So honestly, my biggest advice would be just read through the process, make sure you're comfortable before you start it, and then don't try and rush through it, because it's not like you have to get through this transition in, say, 10 minutes worth of time. You can take an hour, 2 hours if you wanted to step through the process. It doesn't take that long, but it gives you the time to make sure you're comfortable with it and doesn't give you anxiety as you're going through it. Sorry, go ahead.
So what you're saying is what you should do is when you release a new episode, since you're in there already, just throw in the 301 redirect right after you release an episode.
So honestly, I don't think I planned it this way. That's just kind of how it worked out. Is we normally, or at this time, we were releasing episodes on Sundays for ATGN. So I think I dropped the episode on a Sunday, and I don't think I did the transition until like Tuesday or Thursday that following week, just because that's how things worked out. I wish I could say I planned it that way, and in hindsight, perhaps I would, which is don't schedule your transition real close to the release of a new episode, either before or after, real close, just so that you have time for everything to redirect as it's supposed to, so that people aren't going, say I had done this on a Saturday, my redirects and updating media hosts, drop the new episode on Sunday. People are like, where the heck's my new episode of ATGN? Well, it's there on the new host, it's just the redirects haven't gone through all the way, so your feed doesn't see it, so then you think that we're slacking.
Well, which you would be, but
that's fair. I mean, I do have a reputation that precedes me.
Self enunciated expectations. Is there anything that you do differently in the process?
Honestly, no, because it kind of worked out for me. I don't think that I had any problems. I mean, maybe I would have done it a little bit sooner, because I remember, I think I was grousing to you guys about it in group chat a couple years ago, be like, man, I should look into a different host, because I'm sure I could do something different. And this is not to say it's unaffordable or it's a bad price. I'm sure I could use that $100 a year I was using roughly for hosting on Podbean for other things. And then I just either would forget or be like, this works. I don't want to have to deal with it, and kind of stayed down that path. So part of me almost wishes I had considered it a little sooner, but it's also possible that had I done it a little bit sooner, it might not have been as smooth of a process, because who knows if these hooks were developed to easily guide you through the process of migrating your feed from one place to another.
So we talked a little bit about why you ended up choosing Spotify for podcasters, but is there anything that you miss about Podbean?
So honestly, the biggest thing about Podbean that I miss, and this is probably a unique scenario, but I don't have a website built directly for the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast. And where Podbean helped is whenever you created your account on Podbean, they'd basically give you your podcast name.podbean.com as a website that was basically just a WordPress site that you could gimmick up and make look how you want. At one point in time, I'd put some tabs on it, one for our live feed, one for another tab that showed all the Creative Commons music and stuff that we used. So I effectively used the Podbean built-in website you get on their site to be our podcast's website. And I don't see where I get that with Spotify. I get a Spotify page for our podcast. So I wasn't quite sure where to redirect atgnpodcast.com to be honest, because there was no atgnpodcast.spotify.com or anything like that, similar to what I had with Podbean, that I could kind of change into my own thing. This is not a problem if you have your own website built for your podcast somewhere. I just kind of took the lazier route and used the free website that came with my hosting I had for Podbean. So honestly, what I did for ATGN Podcast is I just pointed that URL to our page on the Gonna Geek Network at this point in time.
Oh, that's so nice. You should thank whoever has that set up for you.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty nice thing. So that's what I did in the interim, with the thought being that if I decide long-term to then stand up a separate ATGN podcast website, I can change where that feed goes to go there. So that was my biggest miss, for lack of a better term, when I left Podbean. And from what I could tell, many other providers, you'll get a similar thing, which is, for lack of a better term, a landing page at their domain where people can go and find that stuff. It's been mitigated, but it was a oh crap moment at first when I realized, I don't know where to point atgnpodcast.com to.
When I set up the show on Spotify for podcasters, when we were doing the review, it gave me a URL to Spotify. So it's the Spotify page for the podcast. And I had have a domain, and I redirected it to that page, but it's just going to Spotify. There's nothing unique about your identity on that page. I mean, we tried to inject the social media and it wasn't showing up there. I don't know what that link leads to that is in the back end of Spotify for podcasters, because you can put in your social media accounts in there.
Yes.
I have no idea what those do in Spotify for podcasters. Did you get that to work anywhere?
So I went and put in all of that social media contact information on there, which they didn't have a Threads site. So I still haven't made a Threads page for ATGN podcast at this point in time. So I probably should do that. But I was able to put that stuff in there. I was able to do their linking to other directories in there where I'd already established things so that I could just have that show up on my Spotify profile. But here's the kicker, guys. I don't use Spotify for my music. I use YouTube Music. So honestly, everything I really know about how things are showing up in Spotify is I texted one of my co-hosts. I said, hey, Bachman, can you take a look at this? We transitioned to Spotify and make sure things are showing up right. He played a few episodes, looked at the profile page and said, hey, everything seems to be working as it needs to. And we kind of called it a day at that point.
It doesn't look bad. It's definitely Spotify branded.
Yeah.
And I know that you could possibly use one of the new services out there, the new podcasting website services that are out there, but you have to pay for those. And that kind of mitigates the point of using Spotify for podcasters because it's free. So now you're paying for a website, whereas you could pay for the website and a media host provider like Podbean all in one.
Well,
right.
And I was listening back to our Spotify for Podcasters discussion last week, and I think that was something that we kind of missed, was the entire thing about how the landing page on Spotify was really not a substitute for a website at all. It would be like going and pointing to a YouTube channel, or, even just pointing to like your social media main feed. And that would be more advanced probably than what Spotify has, because you can customize that to a degree. Like it's an area within a website on the internet. It's not your website like a media host usually provides.
But at the same time, I'm not really, and this is going to be a controversial take here, I don't really know how much having that website has really helped me, other than when I literally pointed people there to go to our live page when it was on the ATGN podcast website that we had before. Because most people who were consuming the show weren't finding it by just going to atgnpodcast.com. It was, hey, I saw it in a Twitter feed. Hey, I saw it on YouTube. I saw it on social media here. And I looked up in my podcatcher of choice and caught it that way. There was nothing unique on our website to bring people in. It was literally just a place that we put all of our new episodes, and then I had a separate tab to do for live streaming, which again isn't necessarily as needed in today's world where you can live stream these things via the company's apps. For instance, Podbean has a live stream capability. I never played with it myself because I was already live streaming via Twitch and YouTube and things like that. But there are a lot of podcasters that go live via Podbean's live effect, which again doesn't have you going to your podcast website to find things. You're redirected through Podbean's app and website to wherever that feed is, and then it has a nice little subscribe button, so it doesn't surface your website.
Yeah, as Google Podcasts sunsets, and we've been setting up these new shows as we're trying to check out these capabilities, these podcast media host providers. I've actually gone and looked at the data specifically from Buzzsprout, which publishes them, and Libsyn. Every once in a while, they'll talk about what are the percentages of where their podcasts are being played. And Podbean actually is creeping up. It's like at the 1.52% mark lately, which is actually big when you think about it, when you take a look at what are the big players and what are their percentages are. And then it's at the top of the pack underneath like the big four. And that's pretty cool. And then CastBox is the other one that's about the same. So Podbean is turning into a destination. I didn't realize that you could like place shows through them, even if you don't host through them. So it's more of a player, a destination, kind of like iTunes was or Apple Podcasts than a media host provider.
But I get their play there, which is if I can host through there live streams and I can consume podcasts through there, that means I use the one Podbean app for everything, which means Podbean then gets the information of what I'm consuming, plus potentially has me as a subscriber rather for the shows I'm putting out through there. So it kind of makes them a one-stop app for a podcaster in that case. Meanwhile, you've got folks like me who have been using Beyond Pod many years ago, and when it started to suck, then went to Pocket Cast, who are so used to our podcast player of choice that the thought of why would I switch to a different app to do this, it makes me break out in hives because I'm so used to what I'm used to.
Yeah, you don't want to see Chris broken out in hives.
No, nobody wants to see that.
Let's back up to 2012.
Okay.
When you first started podcasting, when you were in 8th grade or something like that. Why did you originally choose Podbean?
Honestly, because at that point in time, it was the best value, the best bang for the buck. So many folks who are in podcasting now probably don't remember, and I didn't realize when I did it. And I say this semi-facetiously, but in 2012, Podbean was kind of semi a joke when it came to hosting providers. And I'm not being disparaging here, but this was before they had migrated to AWS to do their hosting. So it was not unheard of for Podbean until they got to AWS, and I want to say 2014 or 15, to have extended outages. And the joke amongst people who were on Podbean, like, oh, can't upload my episode, guess they're down again. And it was not unheard of that they could have multi-day outages back then. And they did transition AWS, and that was fixed. But I think I mentioned at the top of it, it really just came down to bang for my buck there, which was I can flat fee get unlimited hosting in 2012 and not have to worry about how many downloads I'm getting or the size of my files or the time length of my files. Because back then when I looked at a lot of the hosting providers, it was, well, if you upload 6 hours per month, here's what it would cost you. If you upload 12 hours per month, and this is an exaggeration, I honestly don't remember what those values were. But for Podbean, it was, it's unlimited. You upload what you want. It can be downloaded as many times as you want. You can remove things and replace them if there's a problem with it. So that was the easiest way to do it. I mean, and even then, it was semi clunky at that point in time. Like the web interface for uploading stuff didn't always work right. So I was using an FTP client to upload episodes because that was the easiest, most stable way to get it somewhere so that I could do things. The Podbean platform, the AWS transition, whenever they pulled that off, made it a completely different beast. And honestly, I think I had one service blip once they transitioned to AWS, and they've been on AWS for, I think, 8-9 years at this point in time. So like I said, I have no heartburn with Podbean. I was not treated poorly. I didn't have issues with it. I just made a move that was better for the finances of my free podcast.
To get a little techie, it's not just where your episodes are being hosted and if it's up or down. It's also the CDN architecture behind everything. So when you're looking at a podcast media host provider, it's not just are they reliable because their servers are up or down. It's also the CDN that they choose to use as well. It's not a criteria that we use. It's a little bit too techy, but it could be an issue with whoever you choose.
Yeah. And to be fair to them, once they made their transition and started doing everything through AWS, I think the only time I had problems is when there was an AWS issue, not a Podbean issue.
All right, so one last question for you on the note of Podbean. I know Podbean has a bunch of extra features that are adjacent to the standard media hosting. Did you ever have a chance to use any of those? And if so, what was your experience?
So honestly, no, because I got in before most of those things existed and there was inertia there and I just didn't consider. I think I got some marketing spam about it. Went, I'm too entrenched in my workflow. I don't give a crap about this. And like, I know they have some AI tools for transcripts. They've got their own live streaming capability, stuff like that. But like I mentioned earlier, we're already doing our own live streaming. I didn't need to go out via Podbean to then take that same audio and put it back on there because I wanted to do video episodes that we had put out on. It's been YouTube for a decade plus, and it's been Twitch for probably 8+ years where things have been going to. So I never really used most of those tools. And to me, it was, okay, these are more tools that I don't know how well the utility will work. And honestly, I'm just lazy and have my way that works for me already that I can do locally. So I probably didn't take the initiative I should have to go and explore if those tools could have simplified things for me. It's possible they may have. I honestly don't know. And I'd seen that question in these notes and I went, God, I don't even know what some of these tools are, and had to go on Podbean's website after I had stopped subscribing to go see what all of those things were. Without logging in, obviously, because I didn't want to start the email traffic again. So I think I might have looked at them differently had I not started putting my podcast up there in 2012 and just been used to the way I was doing things. Had I been a relatively new podcaster or starting a new project, perhaps those tools might have appealed to me more, or I would have been more knowledgeable of how they could be used to help my workflow, but I'm just a stodgy old dinosaur.
I actually knew that you didn't use them, and I wanted to bring it up just to bring up a point that, you know, a lot of times when people are discussing media hosts, they do look at the big list of features and everything that is offered, but those features aren't always applicable to each user. So every user might have a different criteria of what they're hoping to see in a media host as far as the functionality, and maybe someone newer isn't an old fart like us and might be interested in them, right? So, but you know, on the flip side, someone like us who do have our own workflow that we're happy with, they don't mean much. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up, if I'm being honest.
One last question for you. Spotify for Podcasters is shutting down in 1 week. You going to go back to Podbean, or is there somewhere else that you'd go to?
And hold on, before you answer that, it's not actually shutting down. Okay, let's just make that clear right now.
So in this hypothetical, Podbean would probably be at the top of my list just because of comfort and ease of use, but I don't know. So, okay, because of the research I've done, and it's lacking in comparison to other hosts because it's been a few weeks since I last did it, and there are some hosts that are on my I won't consider list, which we can get into if you guys want to at some point in time. I would probably shift back there and probably do a month-to-month plan while I determined if that was the location we were going to reside in permanently at that point in time.
So the correct answer is wait until Better Podcasting completes its survey of services for
That's fair.
hosting your podcast, and then you choose from there.
I mean, you're not wrong. You guys are two of the folks I would reach out to if I was looking into this transition again. I didn't really much this last time other than in passing because I'd kind of made the decision that I wanted to go somewhere to free up that money to use for other things on the podcast. And it really didn't matter what anyone else said. I was going to do what I was going to do unless I could find some major red flag that was going to stop me. But at this point in time, without me knowing what my next free home or lower cost home would be, I would certainly be reaching back out and saying, hey, educate me, because I'm not well educated on this. And there's only so much Google foo I can do to figure out the right path forward.
Well, let's just say the only other logical free option would be just to realize that RSS feeds are another example of us being old guys, and you just put your podcast exclusively on YouTube. That's all you have to do.
I mean, it is there too, but
I'm just poking some people there with that one. Well, thank you for discussing that. If you have any questions for Chris, please come to our Discord at betterpodcasting.com/Discord, or you can let us know, podcast at betterpodcasting.com. We'll pass those along to Chris, because Chris is somebody that just went through a transition of a media host, and you can bet when we finally move off of Libsyn, we will be revisiting this episode to remember all of the cautions that you gave us, Chris, so that we don't have any troubles and we make the same good choices that you did as far as transitioning through as far as the transition process happens with the RSS feeds.
my only caution is just take your time. Don't rush through it. It was remarkably simpler than I thought it would be when I first started the process. Like, oh God, this is going to be a pain in the butt. And it wasn't. It was easy.
This is where we here at Better Podcasting turn the show over to you as we run through some of your feedback. We call this segment Better Podback.
Last week, I issued a challenge because we had a listener post a picture of a display of the Rode demo at Target. That's just for the transcript there. We talked all about how there was a pod mic out on display, and it looked like maybe it was an authentic pod mic. So I issued the challenge, try to plug an XLR into it and record a cast. Well, we had a couple of people try to do this, including you two. And we also had Randy Walker, who originally posted the picture, also try. So really quick, we'll just say that Randy's experience was the same as Chris's. And what happened when you tried to do this challenge at your local Target, Chris?
The security wiring that's hooked into it is screwed into a base that is screwed into the bottom of the microphone, which obscures the XLR input enough that you're not going to be able to even try and plug it in to do so. And I'm not 100% sure that the mic is a working mic, but more just a decent replica.
Oh, so disappointing. And SP, you tried as well, but had a different failure.
Yeah, first of all, challenge accepted and challenge failed. So I went to the Target, and that's right by, in between my work and my house. I went to it, walked to the back, couldn't find a freaking microphone display to whatever, right? I just couldn't find one. And then I went online on the Target app on my phone, and it showed none available in my location, like no Rode gear whatsoever in my location, and that I would have to go to another store an hour away to get to it. So the Target near me, or the Target near me, does not have any Rode gear. So it's not at every single Target out there. That's what we discovered. It's only in select stores, and it's not like it's only a few stores, because there were multiple Targets an hour away from me that had the Rode display, but not the one convenient to me. So I'm like, screw it. I'm just, whatever. I'm going to lose this challenge, and I can live with it. But I did try.
You found that there was a Best Buy that was within shot that had some Rode gear. And this actually spurred a little bit of back and forth between the three of us in a group chat behind the scenes. And yeah, there was a demo there that you had found, or not a demo, a display case that inside had a Rodecaster Duo in it that you could have purchased should you had wanted to, right?
Yeah, it's there. Matter of fact, when I, RMA this, I had been half considering going to Best Buy and picking that one up. So I would have something in the studio, but I thought, well, no, I don't want to have two Roadcasters that have possibly the same issue with them. So I decided not to. But yeah, it was there. My Best Buy apparently is not all that well stocked, and it's not doing all that great, guys. I got to say, I'm kind of curious as to whether it's going to last through 2024 from what I saw. But not only was there a display for Rode, but there was also a display for Logitech, which includes the blue line. There was a display for Samsung. Now, out of the three, they were all sad looking. The best one was probably the blue one. So if I wanted a Logitech Yeti, or whatever they're called now, I could go to the store and pick one up right now after we're done podcasting, but I don't. So those were the three displays. And like I said, it was pretty sad. I sent you guys pictures, and I think you'd agree. It was pretty sad.
Yeah. This spurred me to look at my Best Buy, and I have to say I was surprised. I think I won the available gear challenge on that because there was an SM7B regularly available, an SM67, there was an MV7, then in a whole other display there was a bunch of the Logitech gear, the ones that were actually labeled as the blue products with the Yetis and whatnot, but also there was around the corner some actual dedicated Rode gear and some Mackie gear, and then the Logitech streaming series that looked like almost a Yeti and also almost a Snowball, and then there was a bunch of Elgato stuff as well. So I was shocked actually what I found in my Best Buy. So, if ever I need to go down and buy some of that for some reason, which I probably wouldn't given the boxes of gear I have, but if I did, I know that it's there.
I say you won the challenge. You won your own challenge, and I think that should be illegal.
I will.
Well, you won, but you
you
still failed because no one could record.
Sorry, say that again.
You won, but you still failed because no one could record.
Yeah, I still challenge. I still think maybe if it's real, someone can modify an XLR cable. Give it a shot. The next piece of feedback we wanted to mention, there was Damien the DM had Spotify disbelief. He had listened to our last episode, and after we talked about the history of Anchor and Spotify, he said, wait, what? I'm sorry, when did I go into stasis? Spotify has owned Anchor for 5 years already? So yeah, there you go. Disbelief.
I was in disbelief. That's why I did all the history investigation before we did the episode. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so long ago.
And the last thing that that's the wrong one. My buttons are all messed up this week. I got so much edit. And the last thing that we're going to mention right now is that there was some Rodecaster Pro OG talk actually in our Discord. When I hooked up the Rodecaster Pro OG last week, I did decide to disconnect the Mixcast and hook up the Rodecaster Pro original. I just got tired of the polywaves and a couple other things. Well, this is a polywave, but it's easier. Anyways, I noticed that the back of the Rodecaster Pro has a spec printed on it that says 15 volts at 1 amp. And then I noticed my adapter said 12 volts at 5 amps. Ooh. And I was like, what? So then I posted in our Discord to ask if anybody else had it. And meanwhile, I looked up the spec sheet on the Rode website, and it actually says it's issued from 12 to, or it's capable of 12 to 15 volts. So, not undervolting my gear. But then we also ended up having someone in our Discord say that they had, a 12 volt 1.5 amp adapter. So quite the variance in that first generation of, I guess, power adapters that were provided, and presumably at some point, maybe a 15 volt one as well. So yeah, I did not realize that until I just happened to notice as I was hooking it back up.
So we just assumed they went with the cheapest power adapters they could buy to pair with it. So supply lines changed.
It actually says Rode on it is the weird part about it. Like it literally has, and it's not just...
Is it a sticker?
It's not just a sticker either. No, if it is a sticker, it's a good looking sticker.
I will not put the challenge out there, but just ask if you are listening to this and you happen to have a Rodecaster OG or a Rodecaster Pro 1, whatever you want to call it, take a picture of the adapter, and specifically if you can zoom in to the voltage and amperage, and then get it back to us on our Discord server, which you can find at betterpodcasting.com/Discord, or on our social media. Go ahead and get a hold of us there and just let us know what yours looks like so that we can compare and contrast, maybe more than just the two.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it happened earlier, and I looked around and I was like, what fell?
I thought my cat did something.
That would be-
Yeah, I
that
thought
would
so
be
too.
The problem with podcasting outside the front door when the kids are excited to go play and they slam the door. And the worst part was earlier it was me talking, so I'll probably have to try to re-record it. We look. Did you finish your point about the voltage?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was turning it over to you, and there
Okay.
was awkward silence followed by the door slamming.
So that's going to take us to another So that's going to take us to the end of another episode of Better Podcasting. Chris, thank you so much for coming on this episode today. I know that we pulled you away from your usual Wednesday activity, so I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. As well, I know that it's hard for you to see us more than once a month.
It is tough. I got to get used to that. But it was fun. I really do appreciate the invite to come on and chat about my experience and just chat with my friends. That's what I enjoy about podcasting. But I will fully admit that once we get done doing this show, I'm going to go upstairs and start my DVR about an hour back and start watching this week's episode of AEW Dynamite.
And I will throw this out there for everybody. If you are a user of one of the media host providers that we review, and you want to come on and talk to us about it, talk to us about what we didn't cover, what we did cover, what you agree with, what you don't agree with, get a hold of us, and we might have you on a future show.
And if you want to tell me I'm wrong about everything, just go to the Discord and the Better Podcasting channel. Be like, Chris is wrong, and here's why. I like being told that. Let's have a debate. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I misunderstood something.
And while you are there, make sure you do hop over to the ATGN channel and listen to his show. Subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts. So for episode number 288 of Better Podcasting, I'm Steven saying my year of payments for the SM7B is done. It's paid off.
I'm Chris. I've shifted to Spotify for podcasts.
I'm SP, sadly saying goodbye to the Rodecaster Pro 2. See you guys next
now.
time. Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Better Podcasting. You can find the full back catalog of Better Podcasting at betterpodcasting.com. If you're into geeky podcasts, please check out the other podcasts on the Gonna Geek Network at gonnageeknetwork.com. This show was produced and edited by Stephen John Drew. Voice work was done by L.W. Salinas. Thanks again for listening or watching, and we hope to see you again next week.
Thanks everybody for coming on by. Hey, we recorded a Gonna Geek show about a week and a bit ago now. Anyways, it will come out eventually. So if you want to watch the live version, you can watch that. But yeah, that's where you can usually find Chris, SP, and I talking things. Usually it's geek related. So check that out over on GonnaGeek.com, as well as all the other awesome shows. Sorry for the late start, everybody, including to you, Chris and SP. I'll have to dig in to see what happened there. I do not know.
Liberty Dude, before we go, have I tried using the P4 to cover a show live stream before? Yeah. It's my travel rig. We've used it when I've been traveling before. I just have not used it in the studio before. This is going to be a little bit, so I didn't want to go into it because we'll talk about it next week. But there will be some modifications to my studio based on it in my workflow. Unfortunately,
Yeah, it's a shame. I'm sorry to sound all super negative on it. I just was trying to I'm just trying to hammer home the point to Rode. That's it. Like it's not. But I know that probably is salt in the wound, so I apologize.
So, no, well, maybe. But one of the things to consider, though, is both the replacement and the original were probably original production runs. So if this is a hardware issue, which I think it is, then I wouldn't be hesitant on buying a new one.
Gotcha.
Because I don't think it would have the same problems. Basically, there hasn't been a rash of people saying my Rodecaster, like on Reddit or anywhere, saying my Rodecaster Pro 2 sucks. I think this is literally a factor of the initial production run, both my original one and then this one, which was an early replacement. Basically, I'm pretty sure that all the issues that it was RMA'd for have persisted and have gotten worse. So. If there's any solace to you in wanting to try it, if you can get one that was manufactured recently.
So don't buy it on eBay or Mercari because you can't guarantee that.
Yeah, I would feel bad about selling this, to be honest with you guys, because I know that I've had problems with it and I just don't feel comfortable passing it along to somebody else. And I know that's exactly what Rode's going to do. They're going to take it, they're going to wipe it, they're going to do a bunch of tests on it, and they're going, oh, this works just fine. And it's going to go out to somebody else, and they're going to be like, this thing sucks.
Well, thanks everybody for watching the live stream. Come on back on Thursday for ATGN.
Yeah, we're on Thursdays right now. Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern until at least July, and then we'll revisit when Bachman's new schedule is in effect. So pretty much every 6 months we're going to shift around, I think.
And then Saturday morning for Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, Saturday morning, 10 a.m. this week. We'll be off next week, but this week we're covering the end of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur Season 2. And then next week, or 2 weeks, we will be covering X-Men 97. I don't know what exactly they're calling it, but X-Men, the animated series, is making its return the following week. So we'll be covering that. Chris, I know you watched the original one.
Yes, I need to finish my rewatch because I watched the original one when it was on television. I don't believe I ever finished a rewatch between now and then, other than just catching reruns. So,
How are you watching it?
Disney Plus.
Okay. Well, the reason why I asked is there's many different orders to watch it in,
Yes.
and Disney corrected, and unfortunately why we were watching it for reviewing it on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., but they corrected the airing order to what it was supposed to be, or what made it more sense story-wise. So that's what you find in Disney Plus. If you want to watch it in the original air order, which I don't advocate because things are going to be all messed up, there are websites out there you can follow along, but
No,
Disney
see.
Plus is the order that it was supposed to air.
I did watch it in the original air order, and when I couldn't be on Saturdays, I remember having to program my VCR to record Fox Kids on Saturday mornings to get that and the Spider-Man animated series at the time.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have yourself a wonderful evening or wherever you are, whatever time of day it is. Bye.
Bye.
Bye all. Oh, time to stop my track.